Have you ever had a dream of building a cabin in the woods for yourself? I think lots of people do, but lots of people are also afraid of that sort of thing, especially if they've never built anything before. So in this video, I'm going to present 10 things for you to think about to decide if this is for you and then how to go about doing it. The first thing is assessing your motivations. Why do you want to have a cabin? Think about that because the motivation affects how you get there. Now, I have helped quite a few people build their own cabin in the woods with my online course and this YouTube channel as well. But I always make sure that they want to do it for the right reasons, because it's great to have a little getaway away from the city and quiet and peaceful and beautiful, but there's also work involved too. So your motivation has to be sufficiently strong that you're not only going to put the work in to build the thing, but to maintain it properly as well. Because I've noticed it's usually easier to acquire something than it is to maintain it and keep it going properly for the long haul. So assess your motivation, step number one. Step number two, examine the process. Just get a sense of what you're going to be required to do to build a cabin for yourself. It's one thing to have the dream, it's another thing to submit to getting dirty and cold and wet and tired and all those things as you're building it. So you really need to get a sense of what's involved. And an excellent way to do that is by seeing some of the videos on my channel here. There's plenty of people who do build your own cabin videos online. You'll get a sense of what it's like and whether or not you need to expand your sense of what work means and the timeline it's going to take in order to get the job done. Now, this is a model. I'm going to be talking more about this later in the video, but I strongly recommend that if you've never built anything before, that you start with a model like this before you dive in and spend a lot of money on tools and begin the project only to realize that you don't have the the mental and physical horsepower to continue. It's not a huge job, it's not overwhelming, but you have to understand that if you've never built things before, you're going to have to develop some stamina in order to pull that off. The model is an excellent introduction to that. Not that it's physically difficult to build a model like this, but if you find building what you see here, which is a model of the design of cabin that my course is designed around, if you find this daunting and you can't get through it, then that's a very good indication that maybe you have to reassess your goals or get stronger and tougher and build your stamina in other areas. The model is also excellent because it will lead you through a very low-cost way of experiencing what the build is like. You're going to get a sense of what the different parts are. And as I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about that later when we get into design. Just to recap, step number two is to examine the process, get a sense of what it's like, and I can certainly help you with that. I mean, that's really one of the motivations I have for putting content out on the internet is to let people experience things ahead of time to learn. So if you like what you're seeing here so far, I'd appreciate it, and you'll appreciate it too if you like and subscribe and hit the notifications bell. Then you'll be alerted to this kind of content, give you a chance to think things through, get comfortable with the process, and it could make the difference between whether you have a cabin or not. Step number three, assess the costs. Building a cabin, of course, it costs money. How much money? I often get a question like that from people who are thinking of taking my course, and it's not a question that I can answer with any precision because it's going to vary tremendously. Like, for instance, if you're just building a shell of a cabin and you're going to be content to visit the lake or your forest or whatever and live within open stud frame walls with no insulation, so you're just building the shell, in other words, you're probably looking at less than $100 a square foot by far, maybe $50 a square foot, and it depends on how you source materials. It depends whether you're going to do all the work or not. There are quite a few parameters. At the other end of the spectrum, I know people who have built cabins themselves, never done it before, but they've outfitted it in the most fine and luxurious way inside. So it's an actual house for them, and they live there full time, and it looks beautiful, and there's trim and drywall and all the rest of it. So you go to that extreme, and you're looking at something like what it would cost to build a regular house, because that's essentially what you're doing. So you need to sit down. How much money do I have? You may not have enough money to do the whole thing. That's fine, because I'm a big fan of building incrementally. So you've got $10,000, $15,000. Go in and start the foundation and put up the walls and maybe even get some windows. And you can wait a while. You can still enjoy the cabin while you earn more money in order to finish it to a higher level if you want. One of the nice things about being an owner builder, which is essentially what you will be if you make your own cabin, is that you can take things slowly. You can make more precise decisions about exactly how you do things, and you can also spread out the costs over a longer period of time. None of these things are possible if you're hiring someone to do all the build for you. They're going to want plans, they're going to want every decision made, and then boom, 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 get it done as fast as they can. That works, it gets the job done, but it's less than ideal, both financially and also in terms of design. And I'd also add too, if you're building it yourself, you're going to enjoy this structure much more than if you just sign a check to someone who's going to build it for you. That's a big thing, because it will pay off for as long as you live and as long as you own the cabin. Step number 4, determine your location. And by location, I mean 2 different things. I mean, you're going to need a piece of land somewhere to build on. That's part of the decision. But then even deciding where you put your cabin on your land is also a pretty big and important decision. Now, these cabins, they don't need to be next to a lake necessarily, although that's a very nice thing. There's value in having a nice, tidy, well-made, easy to maintain place no matter where you're going to build. Now, you don't necessarily need to have a piece of land before you can start the process that I'm talking to you about here. The land can come along later. Buying a piece of land is actually more difficult than you might think. Not because the process, the transaction is difficult, but you have to find a spot that is more or less where you want it to be, and also within your price range, and it has to be available for sale. And you put all those 3 things together, and, well, like I said, it's more of a challenge than most people realize, especially if you've never tried to buy land before. So definitely something to keep in mind. But in terms of the site itself, I would strongly urge you not to rush ahead. So you've bought some land, oh, that looks like a great spot, and then just decide on that. That's kind of like deciding who you're going to marry on the first date, or maybe even just the first email. You need to get to know the person better, and you need to get to know your land better. So because you're building it on your own, and you're probably going to be doing it fairly slowly and carefully, I would recommend spending some time on your land. Camp there for a while. See how the sunlight affects the look of the place as it goes through the day, for instance. Pay attention to wind directions. You want a sheltered location if you can on your land. You're also going to want to, if you're next to water, pay close attention to how those water levels vary over the seasons. Some bodies of water don't change much. Others can. Rivers and creeks can flood their banks in surprising ways. So by giving yourself time to assess the site properly, you are going to end up with a much better build. And once you've made that decision for where the cabin goes, that's kind of it. So it's an important choice, and you need to take that seriously. Step number 5, choose a design. This is actually where a lot of people start because it's kind of fun. Although the other steps I've talked about are very important to do in a preliminary way. And I have to say, there's no shortage of plans for cabins online. A great many of them look terrible, in my opinion. They tend to take a kind of a modern look, a single slope shed roof, maybe too tall, disproportionate. For me, and a lot of people that I work with, a cabin has to look like a cabin. Because why do you have it in the first place? Well, it's for shelter and things like that, but it's also an aesthetic experience, and you want to be thrilled every time you walk up to the place and look at it. So my personal preference is for traditional designs. They're starting to come back. We've forgotten a lot of things about beautiful design that we used to know as a society. But this design here, for instance, this is a scale version of the cabin in my course. There are different ways to do it. I'm not saying this is the only way, but there's some things I want to point out here, things for you to keep in mind as you're assessing design. One is a steep roof. This roof here is the rafters, which are these parts here. They're the thing that defines the slope of the roof, and there'll be some sheathing and some shingles or metal roofing on top of that. But 45 degrees is a lovely shape. It gives the classic look. It makes cutting these rafters fairly simple because you only have to cut the ends at 45 degrees. And it also, this is very important, creates a loft space up above. Cabins with lofts are just a lot more interesting. And it's not a part of regular homes, so it also enhances the cabin experience. Another thing that I strongly recommend is some sort of a covered porch arrangement, and that's what we've got here. The inside wall of the cabin is here. This is the front door, but here we have a shelter zone, which I can assure you is very handy when it comes to living close to nature and things. One thing it does is when you open your door and it's windy and rainy or snowy or blowy or something like that, there's a transition zone between outside and inside. So you're not going to have all of that nasty outdoor stuff necessarily wafting right into your home. It's also very handy to have sheltered storage space. Not completely sheltered, of course, because the walls are open, but if you've got a grill or I don't know, so an axe to split some wood or anything like that that you want to have handy, but you also want to have properly protected, then that's where some sort of an open porch like this comes into play. Now you'll notice most of the framing members on this model are to scale, more or less, and we've got some sort of heavy square things here. In practice, those are posts and beams. I'm a big fan of playing those up as much as possible inside. So if you see in here, in the real cabin design that people have built from my course, these are actually beams. They're 6 by 8 inch beams, and they're fully exposed. The same with the underside of the roof. Modern building practices sheathe roofs in plywood or particle or wafer board or something like that. And that's pretty ugly when viewed from the inside. That's why I'm a big fan of using natural materials wherever they will be seen, and roof sheathing is one of them, because with the roof boards visible from the inside, it really does a lot to conjure the cabin feeling. What you don't want, or certainly what I don't want, and I don't think what most people want, is to have a design that looks just like a little suburban house in the middle of the forest. That doesn't do the forest any favors, aesthetically speaking, and it doesn't do the cabin experience any favors either. So be careful about the design. Make sure it actually looks like a cabin and it feels like a cabin, because a surprising number of designs out there do not. Now, I've been throwing a lot of information at you fairly quickly, and it's natural that you might have some questions. So leave them down below in the comment section. I monitor these things, I'll pay close attention, and I'll get back to you with some answers, because everyone's situation is unique. Your location, your aptitude, your timeline, your budget. And if you really do want to build a cabin, then I'm here to help you. I'm also going to be expanding what I do here on Bailey Line Road, both on the YouTube channel and beyond. So stay tuned for more details about that and how you can really move all of your DIY work to the next level. And to celebrate what I'm doing here, the new thing I'm doing, reaching out, bringing DIY training to a next level, March 31st, I'm going to be giving away a cordless DeWalt drill, which is one of the things you're going to need. And it naturally leads to the next thing I want to talk about, and that is step number 6, acquiring tools. You're going to need tools, not a crazy amount of tools. And if you buy tools to help you with your cabin build, you're going to have them forever. If you buy them well, they're going to last a long time. And I pretty well guarantee you that if you build a cabin and you get to enjoy it, that you're going to be hooked. You're going to want to build other things too, maybe an outhouse, maybe a storage shed. Once you've gotten through the cabin experience, it's kind of addictive in a way that you'll start to see things around you and say, oh, I would like to build something like that, or I could use this on my property. So acquiring tools is important. It's a necessary step. And I could go on and on. I could talk a whole video about the tools you might use for your cabin. But if I wanted to give you just one tip right now, it would be Do not buy bargain basement tools. There's been steady downward pressure in the tool market for decades now, and you can get a drill for $39, cordless drill for $39. That's not the kind of thing you want. You don't necessarily need to go for the various highest end tools, but you do want to get decent stuff that you can count on, because once you get underway with your building, it's challenge enough. You're going to struggle with this if you've never done it before. It's a good struggle though, and you don't want your tools giving you grief. So pay for brand name tools, somewhat up from the bottom of the barrel. Keep them in good shape. It's really an investment in your creativity moving on into the future. Step number 7, develop a schedule-free, disciplined approach. So what do I mean by schedule-free? Well, one of the challenges you'll face is actually a psychological challenge. That comes from the distance, the separation between your idea of how fast things get built and how fast you actually will complete things. And I can assure you, I've never met a beginner who actually progressed as fast as they thought they would. It's going to take more time than you think. And if you set up a schedule saying, well, I want to have this done by that time, this done by that time, and you start to fall short of that, and you probably will because you're learning the process as well as employing the process, well, then you're going to start to feel frustrated, anxious, and it's not going to be that much fun. So schedule free, the way I'm using it, means just do the best you can. Fill your work days. Efficient labor. Try to plan things so that you've got the materials you need when you need them. You know, all the usual stuff you'd imagine. But within this context, do not give yourself an expectation of when you're going to complete things, because you really don't know, and it will take you longer than you think. I remember when I first started building, I didn't know this point that I'm making to you now. And well, I built my whole house from scratch, so it took a number of years. But at the beginning, I was frustrated, and I thought, well, why isn't it going faster? Why isn't it going faster? Well, that's because, well, first of all, I was one person working on my own, and second of all, I had to learn the process, and so do you too. So be gentle with yourself and don't impose a schedule. Just simply try to get as much as you can done in any given day, and the rest will take care of itself. Step 8, get help where you need it. And by help, I mean professional help. Well, I guess amateur help as well. There is going to be some heavy lifting involved. Another pair of hands will be very useful for that. So friends and family helping out, great. It'll create bonding time. It will help the cabin to be more precious when you're done because you're generating memories around it and all that. But also don't forget professional help, because it's not a matter of, do I build my cabin on my own with no experience, or do I not, and I get someone to do it all. It's not really one or the other. It's a gradient between the two. So you can decide what you feel you have the time, the inclination, and the strength to do on your own. But then if part of the process involves something you're not familiar with or you don't want to become familiar with, there are professionals that you can hire. Now, you want to work with them closely. You want to make sure they understand what you're trying to accomplish, because building a good cabin involves processes that are significantly different than building a regular modern house. So you want the right person, but you can certainly call in specialists. If you're going to be wiring and plumbing your cabin, there's, electrician, plumber, that's fine. This is all very standard. If you want to hire a carpenter to help you, well, they're going to have to be the right kind of carpenter. What I call a careful carpenter, so not one who is addicted to just blamming together 2x4s and plywood and OSB and trying to get as much as they can done in a day. That's not really the kind of carpenter you want. You want someone who is careful, who will listen to you, who is humble, teachable, and will help you get over those humps and hurdles that perhaps you can't get over on your own. Step 9, give yourself time to muscle up. Now, when I say muscle up, I mean physically, because if you haven't built a cabin before, then the whole work, the process, physically speaking, might be more strenuous than you're used to. So don't make the mistake of thinking that after your first week of building and you feel terrible and you're sore all over, that this is the way it's going to be for the rest of the build, because that's not the way it works. Thankfully, the human body can respond to stresses and you will get stronger. So that's one way that I'm using the word muscle up, but there's also a psychological side too. If you're not used to working outside with your hands for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, then you might fall into the trap of feeling overwhelmed because, oh my goodness, look at the size of this project and I'm tired. And well, there's an antidote for that. And the antidote is to not think too far ahead. So you're feeling overwhelmed? Just think about today. Just think about tomorrow. This morning. Can you just work this morning? Can you handle that? If chances are yes. Don't think beyond that. Just chunk up your day into small steps and don't get overwhelmed by looking at the size of the mountain. Now, you do need to plan ahead and everything. I'm not saying just wing it, okay? But once you finish the planning phase, your design, your tool acquisition, all that stuff, then just take it one little job at a time. Like this morning, I'm going to install the floor joists, for instance. And then let that be that. Don't think beyond that, because you'll probably psych yourself out and you may get overwhelmed, and that doesn't have to happen. In the end, when you're finished your cabin, you will have much more physical stamina. You will be stronger, you will be more capable, and you will also be mentally tougher and have greater mental stamina that will serve you well in every area of your life from then on. Step number 10, focus on the next milestone. This is kind of an extension of what I just mentioned to you, in that the project, even a cabin, although it's not large by housing standards, it still is a pretty big project, especially if you've never built it before. So set aside certain steps that you complete without thinking ahead of time and give yourself lots of time to do that. Like for instance, I coached a couple that were building a cabin in the woods, following my direction, and they'd never done it before. It took them the whole first season just to prepare their site. So this meant cutting a laneway in from the road through the forest. In their case, they had a well drilled. The foundation has to be prepared. Trees have to be cut back, if there are trees in your area, cut back from the cabin area to give you room to work. All of these things are milestones, and it's very important not to expect them to be completed too quickly. So be gentle on yourself. In your own mind, set up the different milestones in a general sense, like site preparation, foundation preparation. Okay, we're going to aim to do the walls and the roof framing now. Next milestone might be drying the cabin in. That means getting a weatherproof roof, doors and windows in place, that sort of thing. If you take the big picture look without a schedule, without saying, oh, I want to have this done by this time, if you take the big picture in chunks, it helps you to have an overview of the process without at the same time getting overwhelmed. So if you like what you've seen and heard here, I'm happy. That's why I'm making a video like this. And if you want to build your own cabin, then you'll want to pay attention to something I'm going to be launching on March 31st, 2025. And that's the Bailey Line Road VIP program, where you get access to all my courses, including my cabin building course, and interaction with me. You'll be part of a community. There is specialty content that I create only for the VIP members, and it's going to be quite a lively little community. So I invite you to pay attention, stick around. When I launch this program, that's when I'm going to be giving away that DeWalt cordless drill I told you about. And well, I'd invite you to join the fun, become part of the community. I think you'll find it very worthwhile.